Growing food for your family is a great reason to garden, and a survival garden to grow that food is doable. But is it a short-term exercise or a long-term solution? Join me today as I help answer the question, is your survival garden sustainable? Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and the tips I'll give you in this video are suitable for any garden in any gardening season. But they're particularly important in a survival garden. In just a typical backyard vegetable garden, if things go wrong, it's no big deal. We just do something different the next year, maybe try some new plants, and everything's okay. But in a survival garden where you might be relying on the food that you're growing, if something goes wrong, it can have a huge impact on you and your family. There's a lot that can go wrong with gardening. Sit down with any old, experienced gardener and be ready to listen to a couple hours of all the things that went wrong over the years. And so when you begin a survival garden and look toward sustainability, you have to recognize that it's going to take time to learn the things you need to know. If you wait until you need a survival garden right now, well, it's too late. Go ahead and start it before you need it. And the starting, the planning, begins with plant selection. Learn about the plants that will do well in your area, in your specific garden. And expect that you're going to learn the right plants the hard way. In my raspberry patch here, these are heritage raspberries. It took me a few years to recognize that this was the best variety for me, because for a few years I was growing Latham raspberries, and one year in particular I came out and most of my canes had fallen to the ground. And over the course of 3 days, I lost the entire patch. I didn't know at the time that here in Colorado, we have raspberry cane borer, an insect that can totally destroy the raspberry plants. I lost the entire harvest that year. Well, it's okay. I learned from it. I figured out the right variety. But that's not okay in a survival garden where you're relying on the food, be it raspberries or any other type of crop. Over time, I've learned the many other plants that do well in my garden. So in these survival garden beds, I'm growing eggplant and squash and beets and turnip and carrots and lettuce and kale. And I've got some melons and some beans and some Swiss chard. These are just some of the plants that I've grown before and I know do well. I'm not growing the plants that I know won't do well. And that's why you need time to figure this out, to try the different plants and find out which types of plants will grow best and which specific varieties of those plants are the ones that deserve a place in your survival garden. And as you're figuring out those plants over time to put into your sustainable survival garden, take a close look at how you're gardening, whose advice you're following. Are you the kind of gardener that uses pesticides? You see a bug and you spray a bug, or you use fertilizers. If the plants are struggling, you put fertilizer on the plants. Well, think about the sustainability of that. You might be able to go to the store right now and buy all the pesticides you need, or go into another aisle and find all of those fertilizers. But if you become reliant on those type of chemicals, what happens when you don't have access to those chemicals anymore? I think it's a better idea to learn how to garden without the use of any chemicals, so that when they disappear, it's no big deal. You already know how to do it. Soil is the key to garden success. Spend time learning about soil and growing a nice, healthy, alive soil, and you won't need any of those chemicals. A good, amended, healthy soil has all of the nutrients that all the plants need, and a healthy plant can fight off all of those pests. So you don't need those chemicals either. You can do something like hugelkultur, which is what this mound is here. I dug a trench and buried logs and branches, covered that with soil, added compost, put mulch on top, and now the plants growing in this bed don't need any additional help other than my care and a little bit of water and sun. The decaying wood in the soil in that hugelkultur bed provides nutrients to the soil and then to the plants for years to come. That's the idea behind developing a sustainable garden. Long-term solutions before the problems even develop. No doubt you know that compost is just about the best soil amendment that you can use. If you're using compost now, where are you getting it? Are you buying it in bags at the store? Maybe buying it in bulk? Well, you can't rely on that. For sustainability, you need to make your own compost. The compost that you're going to use to make your soil better. I've got a double bin system here using some old recycled pallets. Well, I don't have to worry about buying compost because I'm making my own. This year and for every year to come. That's sustainability. These are some of the plants that will find their way into my compost pile, but not until the end of the season, because sustainability often means choosing plants that can serve multiple roles over the course of the growing season. These plants are attracting pollinators to help my fruit bushes, fruit trees, and fruiting vegetable garden. There's also some herbs and some grasses that are going to attract some of those predatory insects that will take care of those insect pests I might have. This is stinging nettle. It can actually make a pretty good fertilizer tea. I also have comfrey growing in different areas for the same purpose. During the season, when these plants are alive and growing, they're helping the garden as a whole. At the end of the season, when the cold comes and these plants start to fade and die, well, then they go into the compost and they'll feed next year's garden as part of that sustainability. Most of the insects in our garden are good bugs, not the bad bugs. And even the bad bugs are usually not going to destroy an entire crop, like the problem I had with the raspberry cane borers. And so the birds that I attract and those beneficial insects are often enough to deal with the insect pests. But what about those pests that really can destroy an entire garden, like the rabbits and the deer? Now you need to think about long-term protection of the plants before they even go in the ground. I have these cages around my fruit trees so that the rabbits and other pests can't nibble on the trunk. And I've got bird netting draped over the top so the deer can't eat them. I've had a problem with both the rabbits and the deer, and this is the best way to protect the plants, to surround it, to put a barrier between the plant and the pest. If you don't think about it until after the tree is eaten, well, you've lost all hopes of sustainability. Protect your plants right up front so that you can get the years of growth you're looking for. You need to learn how to protect your plants from weather as well. I live in a region that can get very severe thunderstorms that will drop devastating hail. One year in particular, I planted my garden, it was flattened by hail. I replanted it, it was flattened by hail again. In the third planting, I got some plants, but nowhere near the crops I would have had if that first planting had survived. So I learned the hard way. And for me in this region, I now use hail cloth. In fact, this entire space with my sweet potatoes and my tomatoes and my peas and squash, they're fully protected by hail cloth so that I don't lose all my plants from that aspect of weather. I use a lot of shade cloth in my garden to protect my plants from the harsh summer sun, like the shade cloth on this bed and on that bed. I also use row cover, fabric cover over these same hoops to protect them from pests. I'll use plastic early in the season and later in the season to protect these plants from cold temperatures. A sustainable garden is a protected garden. So learn how to protect your plants now so that you'll be able to grow them in the future without having to worry as much about the weather. If you're thinking about a survival garden, or maybe you've started a survival garden, no doubt you know that you're supposed to be saving seeds. Saving seeds promotes sustainability. Sure, right now you can go to the store and get all the seeds you want, but do you know about the types of seeds, the plants that you can grow to give you the seeds that you need? In these survival garden beds of mine, all of these plants are heirloom plants from survival garden seeds. I know that when I save the seeds of these plants, that I can use that seed in the next year to grow the exact same plant. That's not true for hybrids. If you buy the hybrid seed from the store and plant it, the next year, who knows what kind of plant you're going to get. It's not going to be the same as the parent plant. Heirloom plants are open pollinated. You need to look for that when you get your seeds. It doesn't have to be an heirloom. It just needs to be open pollinated. But that's often not enough. Right here, I'm growing 4 different types of beans because I'm trying some new stuff, trying to figure out which beans are going to grow best. These beans will cross-pollinate each other. So this year, I'm not going to save any of these bean seeds. I'm going to find the variety I like best and then maybe grow that exclusively in the future. Save those seeds, and now I have a sustainable bean crop for years ahead. I did that years ago with a green bean that I really liked. Over 10 seasons, I never bought a seed packet because every year I saved the seeds I needed for the following year. You need to learn how different plants produce their seeds. The radishes in this bed, well, we normally grow radishes to eat the root. If you want seeds, you can't eat the root. You have to let the plant grow through the whole season to get radish seeds. Carrots are similar, but carrots you have to leave in the ground over the winter because they're a biennial plant that won't give you seeds until the second season. A lot of the fruits that we harvest when they're immature. So the peppers in this bed, if I harvest the jalapeno peppers when they're still green, which is what we think of as a jalapeno pepper, those seeds are probably not viable. I need to let that fruit stay on the plant until it turns red, until it's mature. Then I can harvest those seeds. The same with the cucumbers. We harvest the cucumbers when they're nice and green, but you need to leave the cucumber on the plant until it's big and fat and yellow, and then you can harvest the seeds. You have to learn about the plants, how they produce their seeds, and when you can collect the seeds to be sustainable in your survival garden. Does your survival garden plan include livestock? My neighbor currently has chickens, and if I want eggs, all I have to do is ask, and I often trade my vegetables for his eggs. At some point, I may have chickens of my own. I've had them in the past, and it's a great way to supplement your diet and feed your family. But how sustainable are your chickens? Are you going to the store and getting those big bags of feed for your chickens? Well, you need to think sustainability. You need to think about growing plants to feed your chickens. I grow a lot of Swiss chard, and I was actually asked recently what I could do with all that chard. Well, it's a perfect chicken food. I grow beets. I love the beet root. I'll occasionally eat the leaves, but if I had chickens, I'd feed all those leaves to the chickens. There's a lot of what we're growing that is often thrown away or thrown into the compost pile that should be considered as animal feed. And you should be growing beds specifically as animal feed if you want a sustainable survival garden with livestock. You also need to think about how you use water in a sustainable survival garden. One of the best things you can do is make compost and amend your soil with that. The soil amended with organic matter can retain more water than a soil that hasn't been amended. So it means you don't have to water as often. And when you do water, it's used more efficiently by the soil life and by the plants. Mulch is critical throughout the garden, especially when you're trying to save water. Right now, I use a lot of straw because I can go to my ranch supply store and there are still big trucks delivering the straw bales. But that's not sustainable. That's why I have piles of pine needles and dried grass clippings, and I've got bags of leaves. I also use those ingredients that I can get for free and grow myself to use as mulch in my garden. You also need to think about ways to redirect and use rainwater in your garden. Now, this garage does not have gutters, but that's part of my plan to put gutters on the garage and direct that water into rain barrels. I can then use the water in the rain barrels to water different sections of my garden. When you store your water and then use it, you're not reliant on municipal water systems. You're moving towards that sustainable survival garden. You should also look into gray water and learn how you can use gray water in your garden as well. Now, you may have picked up that throughout this video, I keep stressing what you need to learn, the things you need to try and experiment with, so that when you need a survival garden, you have the skills and the knowledge to have a successful survival garden. One that is not only good for this year, but next year as well, and sustainable well into the future. If you want to learn more about survival gardens, well, click on one of these videos next. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.